second. Both of these aircraft come from the 9th Squadron, the Novena Escuadrilla of the Spanish Navy, stationed at Rota. Now just one of only 3 air arms still operating the type, the others being the US Marine Corps and also from carriers the Italian Navy. And there the second one into the air. UK forces in 2010 and increasingly rare bird since. Key to the Harrier was the particular V-style vertical and short takeoff and landing concept that was originally conceived by a French engineer by the name of Michel Bigot, but which came to be perfected by Hawker Aircraft. And it was as a Hawker product that the first prototype of the P1127 took to the air from Dunsfold in Surrey in a tethered hover on the 21st of October 1960. A very brief glimpse there at the upper end of the speed range of the aircraft, flying past there at 450 knots. The aircraft actually capable of very close to the speed of sound at around about 650 knots. These examples of the Harrier 2 model, which was a transatlantic effort with British Aerospace and McDonnell Douglas as it was then, later Boeing joining forces, and the first prototype of the EAV-8B flew from St. Louis, Missouri in November 1978. The US Marine Corps bought it as the EAV-8B, and the RIAT was, first of all, the Harrier GR5, later upgraded to the Mark 7 and 9. Pairs aileron roll there, out onto the 45-degree line before reversal, and then back in for a teardrop and the max performance turn to the north. Spain, after the United States, was the first export customer for the Harrier. It bought the early EAV-8A model, one of the first generation Harriers. They called them the EAV-8S, the Matador, and they were delivered from 1976, flying from the then Spanish carrier Dedalo, and from 1988 the new carrier, the Príncipe de Asturias. The first EAV-8B models, E for España, arrived in the late 80s, and then about 10 years later these B+ models with a night and all-weather attack capability. Since 2013 they've flown from a helicopter landing dock ship, the Juan Carlos I. To max performance turn to the left, aircraft entering at about 400 knots, not using much more than about 4G, but a good contrast here to some of the high performance aircraft that we have seen today and we'll see later on, that extensively go around that 360-degree turn, very, very close to their maximum G of 9, so you can see how different the radius of turn actually is. The Spanish Harriers is to provide the country's naval forces with the capability to attack surface targets from the air, but they also can fly closer. The 4 thrust vectoring nozzles on the Harrier can be orientated anywhere between 0 and 98 degrees, and they're controlled manually by the pilot using a separate lever next to the throttle. But the Harrier also, in addition to the 4 rotating nozzles, has hot air driven controls on the nose, the tail and the wingtips for better control at low air speeds. Now all of this is very different to the sort of control philosophies of the F-35B model that we'll see in the programme later on, where it's literally undertaken at the push of a button. The pilot workload is significantly less.
20 knots in a Hawk at low level, to then consider an aircraft that is capable of flying at 600 knots but also hovering at 0 speed is actually quite a difficult concept to get your head around. At about 70 degrees, and then ultimately as the aircraft transitions into full wing-borne flight back to the 0 position.
Of course, the Harrier's most famous shipborne exploits were in the Falklands. 28 Royal Navy Sea Harriers, which were only just in service, deployed on board HMS Hermes and Invincible to the South Atlantic, as well as 14 RAF Harrier GR3s also on Hermes.
It was, although the tactical relevance of it, I think the jury is still out on that one. I think it was more for the tabloids.
we've missed, isn't it, at the Air Tattoo since 2010, when the last Joint Force Harrier displays were carried out. And it gives us the opportunity, I think, to reflect on several legends of the Harrier story who've passed away since last we saw the aircraft here at Fairford. Two of the great Hawker Siddeley test pilots associated with it. Duncan Simpson, who was on the Flying Control Committee at this end. Very nice. The Spanish Navy displayed the old EAV-8S model here 25 years ago, but they've never been here with the newer EAV-8B models. Very good to have them back. So that concludes the Spanish Navy contribution to the flying display, and another, of course, of the NATO nations taking part in our NATO 70 celebrations this weekend. They're taking the runway in their wake. The 9 Hawks of the RAF Red Arrows.
Greet everybody if you're interested in meeting them underneath the B-52 at 5 o'clock. That is not, boys and girls, underneath the B-52 at 5 o'clock. Thanks, Ben.
Thank you, George. One Harrier going off at the midpoint so as to get the runway clear for the Red Arrows, who are going to be going crowd rear and joining up to take place. A very special commemoration of the 50th anniversary of the first flight of the Anglo-French supersonic airliner.